I guess for the people in the audience, like, what is the context that we're working with? Like, what have you guys thought about already? Like, what is the direction that you guys are taking? And just give us like a quick introduction of what you're thinking about in terms of Axie governance.
Sure. So governance is it's something that there's still so much research to be done, and it's something that we want to be really careful with. At the same time, we do understand that sometimes we will have to kind of just move forward and set the standard for the space, and that a lot of people and a lot of projects are actually watching our approach to this. So, I mean, I think governance is, it's just a vast subject. I think generally governance is like how does the community help define the trajectory and the path of the project, right? So one of the things, especially with regards to a game, I don't believe in kind of product design by committee. I believe that in the early days when you're still building towards product market fit, that there has to be a ship captain kind of defining the product vision and building it out. But I do believe that the community is great at making tweaks, right? So balancing decisions have already started, the community's already started to, submit Google Sheets, right? To give us ideas. Economic decisions, right? Like we do have awesome ideas bubbling up from the community. So I do see that as a form of soft governance where you have proposals kind of submitted by the community. I think the next step would be to organize some of the top community members who have great opinions on this stuff into councils. And then I think long term, right, you would have these councils of community members, also maybe some SkyMavis team members that are in tandem submitting governance proposals on certain topics for governance voting. I think that on-chain token voting is still very primitive, right? The idea of governance power, I think, especially with an NFT project where you have so many stakeholders. Yes, you do have the pure governance token holders, the ERC20s, but then you also have to balance the interests of people who, right, they might own rare Axies, they might own land in the ecosystem. So I think that's actually also like a math and a design issue to be solved. But yeah, it's really, there's just so much design space. I think that the idea of non-transferable on-chain badges, right, where people can get certain badges to denote different achievements, and those badges could be used to affect your governance weighting and your governance score. I think that that's something that we'd like to also explore in the future. So yeah, there's a lot of design space, and Peter has been, and Terry have done a lot of awesome work as well to help define and help us define the road ahead. So.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, like Axie has a lot of stakeholders, but it also has a lot of like complexity in the game in terms of like different aspects of the game, right? There's rebalancing, gameplay, the economy. Like, how do you think about building the optimum matching function between stakeholders and what they can govern in terms of like aspects of the game?
So I think this idea that different stakeholders could have different governance scores or governance weightings for different aspects of the game, I think that's something that could be and should be potentially explored. I think that's also right, like where the idea of these badges comes in, where you might have this PvP badge, right, that boosts your governance score on governance votes that are specifically related to PvP balancing. So yeah, I think that there's still a lot to define. So here at Axie, we have a governance roadmap with 3 phases, and right? We actually defined each phase for the community recently, and one of the prerequisites, so in the first phase, right, like we'll have, right, like maybe forums, token gated forums, right, community members making proposals, but Sky made this largely still as the captain of the ship. Phase two, right, once we hit product market fit, and we define product market fit in terms of growth terms, I guess, in terms of like daily active users, then, right, we basically go a little bit more towards community governance. So this is a path that we're going to go down with the community. It's still largely being defined and designed. You know, governance can also be an attack vector, right? We just saw a governance attack with I think Beanstalk. So obviously, right, like security needs to be a huge priority, almost #1 priority. And then, yeah, there's still a lot of R&D to be done and defined. So.
Got it. And yeah, exactly. Sort of building on what you just said. Like on the other side of the equation is the fact that most of the games that have some sort of voting system, the voting turnout is abysmal, right? So like, how do you balance something like badges and boosting and sort of committee-specific voting with actually getting people to sort of participate in order to also prevent attack vectors as well? Like, how have you guys thought about that?
Sure. I think that this is one of the problems that governance has, for most projects, has experienced so far, is that, right, it's like, how do you actually increase participation in the community, right? How do you get over that wall of apathy? I think for better or for worse, we do not have that issue with apathy. Like, our players are very interested in the future, and they really want their voice to be heard. They're incredibly engaged and energetic. You know, they get angry. They're very passionate about this, and I think that's part of why a game's governance is actually, games actually will be laboratories for governance for crypto as a whole, because this is something that people care about, and it's inherently interesting. Like, I think governance of a DeFi protocol is a little bit dry. It's like, do people really care how financial institutions function, right? Like in the real world, no. That's a little bit, right, for a mainstream everyday person, that's a little bit too abstract and just frankly boring. Whereas, right, the functionings of a game, I mean, that's something that almost anyone, for better or for worse, could have an opinion on. And so, yeah, I think that games and consumer apps and things that are just fun to use, they have that ability to cross that zone of apathy that is actually negatively affecting so many of the governance systems today.
Got it.
And so when everyone is interested in voting, and then, yeah, like, then you deal with I think, tweaking, like, okay, whose voice, how do you basically count the votes, and whose voice actually matters? And I think that's still, there's a lot of design space there.
And in terms of thinking about the design space, like, what are some of the models that you guys have considered? What are some of the precedents that you guys have considered? Like, what are some of the sort of like research that has been helpful?
So we've talked to many different internal and external kind of stakeholders about governance. And I think, like, we're still in the process where we're gathering a bunch of different ideas. But, you know, as I touched on, I think this idea of, right, having an Axie score, right? So perhaps you have the governance token, but then you also have a governance modifier that can be affected by the things that you hold and also your past achievements. I think that's the base direction that we want to build towards. And then it's like, okay, what are the badges, right? What are the modifiers, and what are the topics that you even govern, right? Like, what are the things that should actually be the zone of governance, right? For like certain projects, right? The governance is basically, you know, okay, what should the interest rate be, or, you know, what should the collateralization ratio be, right? It's so, you know, in Axie, right? It might be, right? Governance might be I suspect a lot around, right, the use of the community treasury, perhaps maybe some PvP balancing, and right. So it's really like what is actually in the zone of governance for the projects, and I think that's still I do think that I think that topics where it's just adjusting a base variable or number, I think those are like, for example, the marketplace fee, right? What should the marketplace fee be? I think that's something that right, it's basically what are the taxes in this digital nation? What's the tax rate? I think numbers like that are low-hanging fruit for governance and seem to be the things that the community is most interested in having a voice over.
Yeah, got it. And as sort of per your observations as well, like I feel like the Axie community is extremely engaged and they really want to participate. And on that note, I was wondering how you guys think about governance as almost a part of the game itself. Like a part of, right, I remember you did a poll once, it was like, what is your favorite part of Axie Infinity? And a lot of people loved the economy. And a lot of people thought about the economy as part of the content. So how have you thought about governance also as part of the content, as sort of like playing in with the game loops?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the amazing things about a game with a open economy is that the stakes are really high. There is, right, the stakes are real, and it attracts way more archetypes of gamers than in a traditional game. There are people who, right, like, yeah, they are interested in just participating in the economy. They're not even, they're not interested in the gameplay. And I think that's okay. Like, some people actually see that as a criticism. I think that, right, attracting as many different types of gamers, some people who might just be interested in the vision of the game, I think that's actually what makes these types of economies and systems interesting. I think that with regards to like governance as a feature, there are people who, yeah, like the main thing that they're interested in is, okay, like, right, they might have their own stake within the ecosystem and then they'll try to influence the direction of the game. I think that is an emerging archetype of player, right? You almost have these, right? Yeah, you have these like Axie politicians that arise, and you have a different type of politician from within the community that rises and tries to gain influence during a recession in the economy. You have others that are more popular during times when the game is booming, the economy is doing well. So we're definitely seeing we're seeing a wide variety of types of actors engage within the ecosystem, and yeah, I think like that kind of protocol politician type archetype is starting to emerge.
Got it. Yeah, and I definitely want to sort of open up the audience to any questions if you guys have any. Like, feel free to just raise your hand, run over there with the microphone at any time, and let me know. I guess on that note, sort of another aspect is that like as long as like the code base itself is controlled by a centralized actor, right? Like all sorts of governance decisions have to be implemented by one party. Like how do you think about then like the role Sky Mavis has in terms of like going forward in the long run with these governance voting and things like that? Do you guys then sort of assume like an implementation role, or are you guys also participating, or is there ever a moment when like Axie itself, is like fully open source, anyone can contribute to it?
Well, I think the long-term goal is to make Axie Infinity itself as an organism, as a living, breathing thing, as anti-fragile as possible. So, and I think Sky Mavis's role is to help shepherd the ecosystem into that state. So yeah, the road there, I think it does require us to have a leading role regarding product design and implementation in the beginning, especially. But then, right, like we'd want to. What are some signs? That that Axie is becoming more anti-fragile is that, right, like we have a bunch of content within the universe that's not necessarily built by us exclusively. So yeah, I think that that is definitely a North Star where, Axie is becoming anti-fragile and not totally reliant on us. But I think, right, the counterintuitive dynamic is that without us as the ship captain in the early days, the project likely won't get to that final state.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess on that note, like at least in my research, when I looked at sort of governance of virtual worlds, a big problem that has existed in the past is arbitration of these social issues that aren't necessarily covered in like the terms of service or some sort of overarching agreement with the publisher themselves and the player. Like as the Axie community grows, and it decentralizes, how have you guys thought about sort of dealing with maybe some bad apples here and there, right? As Sky Mavis sort of takes a step back in terms of their involvement there.
It is an interesting thing where you might have bad apples emerge. We do have a kind of code of conduct that we've released as kind of suggested guidelines to the community. I think that usually what we've seen when we have quote unquote bad apples are people who feel like their voices are not being heard, and usually that passion. Usually these bad apples, they have a lot of passion and it's just being channeled in an unproductive way. So typically what we try to do is, right, see if that person is aligned with us in any way and to figure out, is there a way that we can channel this passion and this anger in a positive direction? Typically there actually is. There are low-hanging fruits, right? Like little projects that they can work on. But it's still something that, we're refining, and definitely it's hard. And what should our role be in kind of policing? I tend to believe that the community should be policing itself, and that's one of actually the things that we should take less of a role in earlier on is, right, like policing and these kind of social issues.
Yeah, got it. On that note, like I recall at the beginning you said Axie sort of is trying to be like a market leader here in terms of like trying things out first, doing a lot of R&D. I was curious, do you see a lot of either Web3 games, DeFi protocols, or traditional games that you feel like builders today could learn from in terms of governance?
Sure. I think that, right, like sometimes people in the NFT gaming space think that, hey, like all this stuff is new. Actually, right, a lot of it has already been seen before in the past with games like EVE Online and Second Life, right? So I think there is a lot to learn from past experiments around this. I think the promise of this technology is just that we can scale it 10x larger than it has been in the past, because you're reducing the secondary market friction, which allows for right, it's kind of like you're taking off capital controls and letting the animal spirits really run. So yeah, I think there are definitely, there are actually a lot of good examples of, for example, like player councils in the past that are really instructive to what we're looking to achieve in the future.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just wanted to remind everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, just feel free to raise your hand at any time. I'll hop over with the microphone. Yeah, and you can sort of ask whatever you want.
Thank you. What I wanted to know is, we run a guild with like 75 Axie schoolers. Will there be like an automatic payment system in the future, or like a system to lend out those Axies when we are not using them? Also to just onboard more schoolers, because like we don't use bots or anything to pay the schoolers out, so it's kind of a big work right now. Like an automatic payment system will make this much easier to onboard new schoolers and just to scale up. Will this be on the planning of Axie Infinity?
Maybe I could have Terry help come back because the audio has been really bad on my end for this entire thing, so I actually can't hear. I couldn't hear any of that.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me now.
I think you need to come closer or something. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's really weird. But the question was, is there any plan on Axie's part to build out sort of automated scholar payout systems and automated scholar onboarding systems? Oh, like automatic loaning systems for scholarships to have them, sort of manage them more fluidly.
Yeah, this is something that we've been looking at for kind of a while now, and we're working on an implementation. The key is that it has to be safe, and so yeah, it's definitely something that we're looking into, and I think it's super important. It's one of the most requested features that we get from scholarship managers. I think we've actually been getting a lot of questions recently on like what is our long-term plan for guilds, right? And how do we make that guild system sustainable? Right, and so I think like our number one priority has to be to continue to upgrade the game and to attract spending that is for fun and status. If we do that, then the economics of the guild system I think will work themselves out and naturally as well. So is making it easier to start and operate a guild? I think that is also important. But I think the root cause of some of the imbalances in economic volatility with regards to the guild system is there's just not enough spending for fun, for status, for non-economic reasons to sustain the level of economic output that the guild managers kind of grew accustomed to in the summer, in the warmer period.
On that note of guilds, we actually had a couple guild managers present today about sort of how guilds are turning into these like value accretive organizations to games. Like from the Axie side, what would you say is what would Axie appreciate the most? Like what is the most demanding need that isn't fulfilled right now in terms of what guilds can provide to the ecosystem?
Sure. So I think guilds are actually going through the experience that most Web3 gamers have, which is you get into the ecosystem, you're interested in making some money. You heard that, hey, these are games where I can make money. That sounds interesting. Like I want to participate, right? And then, as an NFT gamer, you go through this realization that's like, hey, actually as a part owner of this ecosystem, I actually have a responsibility to help make sure that the ecosystem thrives. That's actually that was my journey. I found NFT gaming through and NFTs through CryptoKitties, right? At the beginning, I just wanted to breed some cats and make some money. I then realized, hey, this ecosystem is not going to do well unless we all start to make content and do different things that help the ecosystem become sustainable. I then realized that CryptoKitties was not the model, and the Dapper Labs team was not aligned with actually continuing to flesh out the project, and that's how I found Axie. So I think that guilds are also going through that same realization that mirrors a single player's journey, where they realize that, hey, in order for these ecosystems to thrive and be sustainable long term, they have to do things like create content, educate people on the benefits of this technology, hold physical events, and do all these, even make art and hold different competitions. All these things that add value to the ecosystem, the guilds are starting to realize that they need to take a leading hand in, and I think that's a positive development. So I'm actually very happy about how quickly these guilds are pivoting. And I think it's actually this is why bad economic conditions create the conditions that are needed to actually work ourselves out of these hard times. So I'll say that I'm really excited about some of the experiments that we're seeing coming out of the guild space.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. By the way, before we wrap it up, just want to ask, there's a lot of builders here today. If there's one thing that you would sort of want to tell them, what would it be? Do you want me to repeat that?
One thing that I should tell the audience.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like guild leaders. There's a lot of game builders and people in the space here. Like, what's one thing you would want to tell them?
Sure. Well, one thing that I'll say is, a lot of people, they don't really understand Axie until they try it out for the first time. So we just released Axie Infinity Origin in early access on desktop through the Mavis Hub. So you can start playing Axie for free without having to buy any Axies. Just check it out. There's a lot of propaganda saying like, oh, Axie isn't actually a fun game. I would just try it out and see what you think. We're pretty confident that you're gonna like it. So yeah, if you're a game builder, if you're a builder, we definitely want to attract awesome people to the ecosystem. We have a builders program out there, so if you check that out, you can definitely apply. Yeah, there's so many different ways to get involved with Axie, and yeah, I would love to welcome you to our community. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.